"Proceed," Counselor said the Lord Adjudicator, her voice resonating through the vast, dimly lit chamber. The Adjudicator, a being of ancient lineage, shifted her massive form, her outer eye stalk sinking slightly into her head, a gesture the body language translators conveyed to the human audience as condescension. "Thank you, Your Lordship," responded the Pra's counselor, offering a shallow bow before rising gracefully on his stilt-like legs. Though appearing ungainly, these limbs moved with an unexpected elegance, conveying the subtle power and history of his race. "Your Lordship, the Pra have existed for approximately 9.2 billion years, far older than the resource node designated 224292G, which the humans refer to as Earth. Long before humans even evolved, one of our scouting vessels traversed the 92G system, marking it on our charts for future strip mining. As is our way. Our history is clear, Your Lordship. Under Council Statute 9917, Article 33, Subsection 98, Paragraph 412, the planetoid belonged to the prey conglomerate. Unfortunately, a sapient species humans began to evolve on this property, making things rather complicated. Despite this, it is vital to note that this does not detract from the legal fact that 92G remains Pra property, the Pra counselor continued, his voice unwavering. Given that much of the galaxy has already been claimed, the Pra find themselves in desperate need of resources, necessitating action on ownership claims such as 92G. Perhaps if we had acted more swiftly upon our discovery, this entire situation could have been avoided. But fate would not have it so, and here we find ourselves. Under Council Statute 14722, Article 923, Subsection 2, Paragraph 66, and as demonstrated in the case of the prey conglomerate versus the Xenobio Wildlife Consortium, the evolution of an intelligent species on the property of a council race does not remove ownership from the original claimants. I submit these facts for your consideration. Your Lordship, the Lord Adjudicator's massive eyes panned slowly across the chamber, settling on the humans, who were frantically poring over a gargantuan tome of council law. "Do the humans wish to rebut?" she inquired, her voice dripping with expectation. "Yes," stammered one of the humans, clearly flustered by the weight of the moment. "Just one moment, Your Highness, Lordship. Sorry, Lordship," he fumbled, eliciting amused chittering from the gathered extraterrestrials. The translators coolly informed the humans that this was the equivalent of laughter, a sound that seemed unbearably cruel with the fate of their entire species hanging in the balance. 3 of the human lawyers pointed excitedly at a passage in the book, and the lead counselor straightened his suit before approaching the bench. "Your Lordship, everything the PRA counselor has said is indeed accurate, according to the claim manifest recorded long before our species had even begun to evolve on Earth. By all accounts, the planet is rightfully theirs." The Lord Adjudicator's eye stalks coiled together in confusion. "Are the humans arguing for the opposition now?" she queried, a hint of disbelief in her tone. "No, Your Lordship," the human counselor replied, a sly smile playing on his lips. "Of course not. Allow me to clarify. My esteemed Pra colleague mentioned the case of the Pra conglomerate versus the Xenobio Wildlife Consortium, where a form of primitive life evolved to the point of rudimentary communication and social structures on a planet they designated as 21312C. These creatures possessed intelligence comparable to that of our apes or aquatic mammals capable of social interaction and basic communication with other species, but lacking any higher civilization, artistic expression, or complex technology. However, humans are different. We have built civilizations, created art, and achieved complex technological advancements. Therefore, we must be given special consideration." The prey counselor scoffed loudly, his disdain evident. The human counselor, undeterred, continued, "That is why the human race is prepared to relinquish Earth. But only on the condition that the prey conglomerate takes full responsibility for the relocation of every human inhabitant and every piece of infrastructure we have constructed since the dawn of our civilization." The Pra counselor erupted from his seat, his voice a mix of shock and fury. Absolutely preposterous. There exists no legal precedent for such a demand. He was swiftly silenced by the Lord Adjudicator, who commanded the PRA conglomerate will remain silent. She then turned her attention back to the human. "Continue, please," she urged, her tone a mix of curiosity and authority. The human counselor nodded. "If your lordship recalls the Xenos conflict, the defeated party sued for peace under the Capitulation Act of Galactic Date 920. The council ruled that the victors, who desired the planet itself, were responsible for relocating the surviving population and as much of their property as possible. The victorious party complied, setting a precedent. The PRA counselor's mouth fell open in stunned silence. The Lord Adjudicator leaned back in her seat, her eye stalks drooping slightly as she absorbed the implications of the human's argument. "You humans," she muttered gravely, "consider this situation a matter of war, with the survival of 80% of your species at stake." "We most certainly do," replied the human counselor, his voice steady, despite the enormous pressure. The Lord Adjudicator's eyes narrowed as she contemplated this unexpected turn of events. The human stood motionless, barely daring to breathe under the oppressive weight of the moment. The PRA counselor, still confident in his species' dominance, felt a growing unease but remained outwardly composed, certain that the humans had no real chance of swaying the court. "The court rules in favor of humanity," the Lord Adjudicator declared, her voice echoing through the chambers. "It agrees that under these specific circumstances, a declaration of war has indeed occurred, simultaneously with a declaration of capitulation under the Capitulation Act of Galactic Date 920. Therefore, the PRA conglomerate is found responsible for the relocation of humanity and all its holdings from Earth." The chamber erupted in a dull roar as the gathered spectators processed the ruling. The PRA counselor shot to his feet, desperation in his eyes. "Your lordship, as I have previously stated, the conglomerate is already severely depleted of resources. We cannot possibly comply with such a relocation. There are simply no funds." To his voice trailed off as the Lord Adjudicator raised a hand for silence. "If the PRA conglomerate is unable to provide for the aforementioned conditions," she intoned, "then victory must instead be awarded to humanity." A deathly silence fell over the chamber, broken only by the faint squishing sound of the Lord Adjudicator flexing her eye stalks. The PRA counselor, feeling the unyielding pressure of the room's gaze, slumped back into his seat, his confidence shattered. He searched frantically for words, for any argument that might salvage the situation, but found none. "The PRA conglomerate capitulates," he finally whispered, his voice barely audible. "Ownership of 92G is relinquished to humanity." And so, without a single shot fired, without a single death, without even a ship leaving port, humanity had won its first interstellar war. The chamber buzzed with the implications of the ruling, the murmurs of various species blending into a low hum of disbelief and admiration. The humans, who moments ago were bracing themselves for the worst, now found themselves victorious in a battle of wits and law rather than weapons. The human counselor, his nerves still tightly wound, allowed himself a small, relieved smile. His colleagues exchanged glances of astonished relief, still processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. They had secured their place in the galaxy, not through force but through cunning and the careful application of ancient legal precedents. The PRA counselor, on the other hand, sat in a state of shock, his elongated limbs trembling slightly. His mind raced as he tried to comprehend the full scope of the loss. An entire planet, rich with resources, slipped from the grasp of his species, all because of a loophole exploited by a race barely a few millennia into its civilization. The Lord Adjudicator remained still, her eye stalks focused on the humans, observing their reactions closely. The chamber gradually quieted as she spoke again, her voice commanding and cold. "This ruling is final. The PRA conglomerate will begin the necessary preparations to transfer ownership of 92G Earth to humanity. All resources and assets previously marked for extraction or exploitation or remain untouched. The Council will oversee the transition to ensure compliance." She paused, her gaze shifting to the PRA counselor. Failure to comply will result in severe penalties, including but not limited to sanctions, embargoes, and possible expulsion from the council itself. The Pra counselor nodded weakly, his previous arrogance now replaced with a palpable fear of the consequences. The council chamber, once a place where his species' dominance was unquestioned, now felt like a trap closing in around him. He could do nothing but accept the terms laid out by the adjudicator. The humans, though victorious, understood the precariousness of their situation. The relocation of an entire species was no small feat, even with the PRA conglomerate footing the bill. The logistics alone were mind-boggling, not to mention the psychological toll on billions of people forced to leave the only home they had ever known. The human counselor knew this victory was just the beginning of a long and arduous process. He stepped forward once more, his tone respectful yet firm. "Your Lordship, while we are grateful for this ruling, we request the assistance of the Council in ensuring a smooth and humane transition. The relocation of humanity and its infrastructure will require significant coordination, and we ask for the Council's guidance in this matter." The Lord Adjudicator regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and approval. "Your request is noted. The Council will convene a special committee to oversee the relocation. The Prey conglomerate is hereby ordered to cooperate fully with this committee. Any resistance or obstruction will be met with immediate punitive action." The Pra counselor, still reeling, finally found his voice. "Your Lordship." He began, his tone now stripped of its former confidence. "The Prey conglomerate has always respected the rulings of the Council. We will comply with the terms laid out here, though it will stretch our resources to the limit. However, we must ask for time. Relocating an entire species is unprecedented, and our resources are already strained." The Lord Adjudicator's eyes narrowed slightly. "Time is a luxury you do not possess, Counselor. However, the Council is not unreasonable. You will be granted a standard galactic year to complete the relocation. Should this prove insufficient, additional time may be requested, but only if significant progress is demonstrated." The Prey counselor bowed his head, acquiescing to the terms. He knew that a standard galactic year would barely be enough, but it was better than nothing. The humans, though sympathetic to the strain this would place on the Pra, remained resolute. Their survival was at stake, and they could not afford to show weakness. As the session came to an end, the chamber slowly emptied, leaving the human delegation to savor their unlikely victory. They had not only secured their place on Earth, but had also demonstrated to the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, one that could not be easily dismissed or subjugated. The lead counselor, now feeling the weight of the past hours lift slightly, turned to his team. "We've won the battle, but the war for our future is just beginning. We have a year to ensure our people are safe and to prove that humanity deserves its place among the stars. Let's get to work." His team nodded, determination etched on their faces. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they had faith in their resilience and ingenuity. As they left the chamber, they carried with them not just the hopes of their species, but the beginning of a new chapter in human history, one where they were no longer just inhabitants of Earth, but rightful players on the galactic stage. The Pra counselor, watching the humans depart, felt a deep sense of unease. His people had always believed in their superiority, their right to dominate lesser species. But today, that belief had been shaken. The Pra would need to adapt, to reconsider their place in a galaxy where even a species as young and seemingly insignificant as humanity could outmaneuver them. As he left the chamber, he vowed to himself that this would not be the end. The Pra had survived for billions of years through adaptability and resilience. They would find a way to recover from this loss, to rebuild their strength. But for now, he had to focus on the task at hand, completing the relocation of humanity without plunging the Pra conglomerate into ruin. The future of his people depended on it. And so, the stage was set for a new era. Humanity, having won its first interstellar conflict without firing a shot, now faced the monumental task of securing its future among the stars. The Pra conglomerate, once a dominant force, was left to grapple with its own vulnerability and the realization that the galaxy was changing. The Council, ever watchful, would oversee the transition, ensuring that the balance of power was maintained. But in the hearts of the humans who had fought so hard for their home, a new sense of purpose took root, a determination to not only survive but to thrive in this vast, unpredictable universe. And as they began to prepare for the challenges ahead, they knew that they had proven something important, that intelligence, strategy, and the will to persevere could be just as powerful as any weapon. The weight of the situation settled heavily on both the humans and the pariah as the days following the ruling began to unfold. The Council's decision, though final, was only the beginning of a long and arduous process that would test the limits of diplomacy, logistics, and the very resilience of the species involved. For humanity, the victory was bittersweet. The thought of leaving Earth, the cradle of their civilization, was a bitter pill to swallow, even if it meant survival. The Earth had been their home for millennia, and the idea of relocating everything they had built, from cities to cultural heritage, was daunting beyond measure. Yet there was no choice. The pariah conglomerate had resources that humanity could never hope to match in a direct conflict, and the court's decision had been a stroke of luck, a rare alignment of law and circumstance that had given them a fighting chance. Now, they had to capitalize on that chance. Humanity's leaders immediately began to mobilize, forming committees and task forces dedicated to the colossal task of relocation. Scientists, engineers, sociologists, and logisticians were pulled into the effort, working around the clock to devise a plan that would ensure the survival of their people without sacrificing their culture and way of life. The Council had granted them a galactic year, barely enough time to begin the process, let alone complete it. But humanity was resourceful. They had faced extinction before, whether through natural disasters, wars, or their own follies, and had always found a way to survive. This challenge, though unprecedented, was just another in a long line of existential threats they had overcome. The first priority was to secure a new home. The Council had already provided a list of potential planets that could sustain human life, each with its own challenges and opportunities. These planets were scattered across the galaxy, some closer to Earth than others, but all were uninhabited or sparsely populated. Teams were dispatched to these planets to begin the process of evaluation. They would need to assess everything from atmospheric conditions and soil fertility to potential threats from indigenous species or environmental hazards. The goal was to find a planet or planets that could support the entire human population while allowing for growth and development. This search was fraught with tension. The scientists and explorers sent to these new worlds knew that their findings could determine the fate of billions. If the planets were unsuitable, humanity would face an even greater crisis. They would need to find a way to survive on a hostile or inadequate world, or face the unthinkable, the potential for extinction. Meanwhile, back on Earth, preparations were underway to begin the relocation of infrastructure. Entire cities were being deconstructed, with every piece carefully cataloged and prepared for transport. The logistics were staggering. Massive ships were being constructed to carry people and materials across the vastness of space. These ships were designed not only for transport but for survival, capable of sustaining life for extended periods should the journey take longer than anticipated. The pariah conglomerate, for their part, faced their own set of challenges. While they had agreed to the Council's terms, the strain on their resources was immense. They had not anticipated the cost of relocating an entire species and its infrastructure, and the effort was already causing unrest within their ranks. Factions within the pariah began to voice dissent, arguing that their resources would be better spent on internal development rather than on fulfilling the terms of a humiliating legal defeat. The PRA leadership was caught between a rock and a hard place. They could not defy the Council's ruling without risking severe consequences. But the longer this relocation effort dragged on, the more unstable their own society became. Already, whispers of rebellion were spreading, and the pariah leadership knew that they were walking a tightrope. They had to find a way to fulfill their obligations without collapsing under the weight of their own problems. As the days turned into weeks, and then months, the relocation effort progressed, but not without its setbacks. On Earth, the human population was divided. Some accepted the inevitable and prepared for the journey to a new world with grim determination. Others resisted, refusing to leave the only home they had ever known. Protests broke out in cities around the globe, with some groups demanding that humanity stay and fight, even if it meant annihilation. The human government struggled to maintain order, knowing that time was running out. They needed to convince their people that leaving was the only option, and that staying behind would mean certain death, either at the hands of the Pra or from the depletion of Earth's resources. The Pra, on the other hand, were dealing with their own internal strife. The cost of relocation was draining their coffers, and as resources became scarcer, their society began to fracture. The leadership tried to placate the populace with promises of new resources and territories once the relocation was complete, but these promises rang hollow to a people who saw their standard of living decline with each passing day. In the midst of this chaos, a new threat emerged, one that neither the humans nor the Pra had anticipated. As humanity began to settle on their new home planets, they encountered signs of another intelligent species, one that had been lying dormant on these worlds for millennia. At first, these signs were subtle ancient ruins, strange energy readings, and occasional sightings of strange creatures that seemed to vanish as quickly as they appeared. But as the humans dug deeper, it became clear that they were not alone. This new species, though long dormant, was beginning to awaken, and they were not pleased with the arrival of these new settlers. The Pra, monitoring the situation from afar, realized that their problems were about to multiply. If this new species proved hostile, it could disrupt the entire balance of power in the galaxy, not to mention the precarious peace they had been trying to maintain. The Council, too, began to take notice, and there were murmurs of another tribunal, one that could change the fate of both humanity and the Pra once again. The humans, for their part, found themselves caught between the need to survive and the fear of what might happen if this new species decided to assert their dominance. The victory they had achieved in the council chamber seemed distant now, as they faced the reality of life in a hostile galaxy. They had won the right to survive, but the question remained, would they be able to hold onto it? If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. For every comment that says we will heart every single one of them, thank you for your time.